Welcome to our final webinar in this series of 4, looking at all the things we haven't looked at yet. And we have some kind of exciting things to share with you because, of course, today is the exact Jupiter-Pluto conjunction, the first of 3. We just happen to be doing this, and it also happens to be the day of the closest connection of Venus with the Pleiades. So lots of great things happening in the sky. And we have a lot to share with you. So Daniel, you want to start and tell me when you want me to
Yes,
share?
I want to take an opportunity here at the beginning of this class to actually invoke and acknowledge the lineage, which we haven't done yet in the previous 3 classes. And as you tune in here at this time, also I invite you to tune in to your own, both karmic and family and dharmic lineages, the places from which you've gained your best knowledge of, best connection to who you really are. So in this school and in my own life and in our work together, Kaylin and I want to specifically acknowledge the ancient ones, the Greater Shamanic Council of Light, the teachings attributed to Seshet and Hermes, Thoth, Trismegistus, and the Ark of Grace, from whence came the teachings of as above, so below, as within, so without. Acknowledge the traditions of the Merlin and Avalon and the Round Table. Every time that motif appearing in history, referring to the time when men and women can work soulfully, heartfully, and in the practical world together as allies, as Gylanic co-collaborators. And we also acknowledge the calendric wizardry of many parts of the world, from the Maya to China, to the Vedic civilization, to the Babylonians, the Hellenistic culture, all the ones in more recent history that have contributed to this paradigm. We also want to acknowledge the Neolithic people and the hunter-gatherers and the people that have kept alive a connection to our Mother Earth. We need their wisdom at this time. I'm particularly thinking now of the 85,000-year unbroken lineage traditions of the Australian Aborigines. I'm also acknowledging the wayfarers, the great travelers that coursed the whole oceans for so many thousands of years before recorded history, following the stars. I'd like to acknowledge the traditions of the Magi and the Sabians and the different societies that knew when, like now, it's a turning of the ages. And I also want to acknowledge the main people recently who helped inspire these teachings in the Shamanic Astrology Mystery School and the Shamanic Astrology Paradigm. Dane Ridjar, Rudolf Steiner, Carl Jung, Sri Aurobindo, others that have contributed to this, we acknowledge, including D.K. and the Tibetan and Alice Bailey and those teachings. And lastly, I want to acknowledge in my own life, and many of these have contributed to this school and this paradigm, the teachers not in human form. The great star cult hierophany that is in Death Valley, the mystery teachings of Mount Shasta, Haleakala, and also the Wonderland of Rocks in Joshua Tree, and the sacred landscape of Western Ireland and the islands of the Highlands and the islands of Scotland. These places in particular I wish to invoke and acknowledge here at this time. And a special prayer I wish to bring forth now toward right now the billions of people on the planet that do not have the same infrastructure, the same benefits, the same support system that, like, say, people in Australia or America or Europe have currently. And I'm thinking here specifically in the Philippines, where they've really totally drunk the Kool-Aid, and so many people here are starving and they're not distributing food. And the president here has issued a shoot to kill order to anyone who breaks the quarantine. So I want to specifically offer a prayer to them, and that we really need to keep in mind being of help to those that have less than we do. And so now with that as our foundation, let's go into this, into our final presentation at this time regarding this time frame that I believe is the most important global world event that has happened since 12,100 years ago. So we're gonna, one thing I'll just mention generally here, that whenever Kaylin and I prepare our look ahead to a year, one of the starting places is the synodic cycles, particularly Venus and Mars. There are 3 different Mercury synodic cycles that happen each year, but they only last about 120 days each. And they will give a certain theme for a year regarding the way cognition, perception, and communication operates. We're right now in an Aquarian overtone for Mercury. That lasts up until July 12th. Just a few words on this. I mean, well, the one that follows that is will be the Cancer overtone, which will go from July 12th until November 3rd. And then there will be a Libran overtone that begins on November 3rd, 2020, but that goes to February 2021. Those are the time periods where our capacity to use our minds, actually it kind of doubles back, or it doubles down. I mean, an opportunity to perceive things normal, different than a normal way. You know, all of you know in the school that we don't really place a quote negative thing on Mercury retrograde. It just gives you a different way of perceiving things. Well, the one we're in now with the Aquarius overtone, you know, so it's giving rise to that cosmic overview. That's very, very helpful. But it's also because it's the overtone and there's a retrograde in it and so on, that it's an opportunity also to take that cosmic overview, the eagle view, and bring it also down into the depth of our psyche, into the less, I say maybe more right brain, less left brain. But I mean, we could do like a whole class just on the Mercury cycles, but there's way more to this, maybe we could say of greater importance for us to dive into, because in our class today, we're going to be putting special emphasis on the Venus synodic cycle, the Mars synodic cycle, the eclipse cycles. We're going to bring Eris into the story also. And we're going to look at the fact that we're changing around the time of the June solstice, moving into a different set of signs for the nodal axis. And so all these things we're going to try to cover. So right now I'd like to turn it over to Kaylin to discuss the new Venus cycle that will be taking place, and your thoughts on that.
Awesome. Yeah, it's quite an exciting new cycle that we have coming up. And you'll see here, Venus will be rising in the morning sky near Aldebaran. This is where it's going to be actually later this month. And so this isn't the exact, because when it rises in the morning sky, it doesn't rise up in that exact way necessarily. But this is the closest rise of Venus as starting a new cycle in her 104 years of rising up in the Gemini sign. And you can also see here, because this is an earth sky thing, they call this the constellation of Taurus. We would call it the bull. And the reason is because Aldebaran is around 10 degrees Gemini, and Venus will be right there with Aldebaran, rising in the closest and perhaps really the 1200-year cycle of Venus. Well, actually, no, I'm going to take that back. 155 years from now, Venus may rise up this close to Aldebaran. So it's very significant. And plus, as I mentioned earlier, we have today Venus in its closest connection to the Pleiades in 8 years, and literally kissing the Pleiades. Got to see that last night. It was just starting. And then tonight it'll be even closer. And tomorrow night will be also pretty close. But tonight's the closest night. So I just want to show you that these are handouts you have access to on the class page for the overtones of Mercury, the Aquarius, Cancer, and Libra overtone, with the different dates and important timings that you can tune into if that's something you're interested in, especially if you've taken our classes on the Mercury cycle. You might find those especially useful. This is a very simplified version of the Venus cycle, just giving the main dates, because when Venus rises up, and basically Venus will be conjunct the Sun on June 3, and then rises up on June 9th, and will station direct on June 24th. And then these are the dates for each of the Venus gates. And so one of the things we're looking at is the Gemini metagoddess. She is perhaps going to help us remember not to take ourselves so seriously. Maybe have a little more fun, have a little more play. She's the rainbow goddess. There's a lot of very cool things she's also going to maybe help us bring through the new story for the new Earth. And part of what's really amazing about this, and here showing the Pleiades, the Venus with the Pleiades tonight, how close it's going to be. But this this Venus cycle is also featuring the North Node with Venus, the exact conjunction August 5th, because the North Node's in Gemini and Venus is in Gemini. Now Venus will go through this cycle every 8 years. Every year Venus will be in Gemini, but it's only every 56 years that Venus can be conjunct the North Node in the sign of its overtone. And that just so happens to be happening now. There will be a second conjunction on May 17th, and this is going to also be near Aldebaran. And this will be in the evening sky just after Venus has passed through the root chakra gate on her ascent journey. And there's, so this handout, you have all this information in the handout that we're giving you, and as part of this class. And just so you know that the last time this happened was in 1964 to 1966. And then the cycle, so, and because Gemini came on the world stage, the metagoddess, the overtone, came on the world stage on June 30th, 1948, and it is on the world stage until May 29th of 2060. At that time, Venus will rise in Taurus on May 29th, 2060. So literally, this is one of the rare cycles that we've discovered, is sometimes Venus will rise 12 times in the sign of its metagoddess. Sometimes it rises 13 times and sometimes 14 times. 14 is more rare, 13 is kind of the average, it's 104 years. So we've got Gemini on the world stage for 112 years, pretty cool. So I think that's pretty much everything I want to say, except that I just also wanted to show you, again, this is April 10th with Venus very near Aldebaran. It will have passed the Pleiades where it is right now tonight, and then by April 10th it'll be up by Aldebaran. It's going to go past up into it's beside the horns of the bull. Oftentimes you can find it within the between the horns of the bull, but right now it's on the outside of it because it's in its most extreme out of bounds, and why it's passing so close to the Pleiades, because usually it passes by the Pleiades over here somewhere. So it's pretty remarkable and definitely worth tuning into, because this is a rare opportunity for us to connect in with these really important stars in the sky that are easy to start developing your own relationship with if you haven't already done that, and to deepen your relationship if you have. So I think that's that. And so Daniel, you want to talk about Mars now? Or did you
if I could just interject something regarding the new Venus cycle, you know, each 8 years, there's this, the evolution and moving forward into a different cycle of a different expression of the goddess. but this applies for men too. And so while women, people born female, if they have something genuinely connected to Gemini, then that's an empowerment time for them. And the feminine principle is about Gemini. But for men, it's their relationship with this kind of archetypal feminine. So how can the masculine, how can men, that is to say, work a sacred marriage relationship with the Gemini goddess? Sure, Gemini goddess has something to do with fun and play, that's right, but she's also free, and she's also like very highly developed in her consciousness, in her mind, and from a spiritual perspective, the whole point of Gemini is not just to be stuck in the mind, but to be able to go beyond duality and polarity. So certainly that would be a version of the feminine in both men and women that is not capturable in what do we say, from a normal perspective. I mean, it's like there's a freedom and a beyond duality and polarity aspect to this. So we could say that men that have some sort of issue regarding the woman has to be in command, to be controlled, or to stay the same, or to be maybe more feeling function rather than mental. Well, then they're going to have some challenges with this. So they're going to have to actually learn how to surrender and to be more flexible and open themselves. So this is just another thing that so like over the last 4 or 5 years, Kaylin and Tammy have specialized in working with the Venus cycle, and it's beautiful work. Eric and I have often done stuff with Mars, but this is not to separate it, like Venus is just for women and Mars is just for men. Well, wait till you see what is about to happen with Mars, because then this would apply also to people born biologically female, how they are going to relate to the archetypal masculine, both outside and within themselves. Very
Before
important.
we go there, I just want to say that there's a little 5-minute video kind of looking at Venus and Gemini as the medicine, the rainbow goddess and the medicine that we need now. And so that's just a little 5-minute thing that kind of covers some of the things that Daniel was just sharing, but a few other things as well. So that's also posted on the class page if you want to check that out.
I should also mention that the one that we've been in for the last, more than a year is the Libran one, right?
Right.
So, oh my goodness, there's other than the fact that they're both air archetypes, they don't really have anything else in common.
And we still have like a little over 2 months of the Libra goddess on stage. So I just wanted to show you, this is the handout you all have access to on the class page. This is just a little bit more interesting thing to look at in terms of the dates. So take it away, Daniel.
So you see what happens with the Mars synodic cycle, and you can all, maybe hopefully a lot of you, have been able to see in the morning sky this dance between Jupiter and Saturn and Mars, and between now and the summer and late summer and early fall, Mars is going to significantly brighten. Like right now, it's almost exactly the same brightness as Saturn, but it'll soon be considerably brighter than Saturn. The unfoldment of the development of the Mars cycle takes 26 months or so. And it's also in 2020 that we're going to be reaching a new one. Now, for those that really want to get deeply into this material, we certainly suggest the online synodic cycle class, right? Because it's in some ways, there's less knowledge about the Mars cycle because it's a bit more complicated. It takes 26 months to unfold rather than slightly more than about a year and a half for Venus. And also the return cycles for Mars are more rare than they are for Venus. But just very briefly, from June 27th to October 14th is the thing we call the gestation. It's like there's a conception that takes place of a new Mars archetype. And then when there is the Mars-Sun opposition, October 14th, then it's the full blossoming, the birthing of the new Mars archetype, which is going to be Aries. Now, there's something that was blowing my mind when I was doing some more research on this. For those who were on the class yesterday, you may remember that I was talking about the previous Uranus-Saturn conjunctions. There was that really important one in 1942 at 29 Taurus. I mean, there's that 29 Taurus thing, you know. So Saturn-Uranus was conjunct right at the Pleiades, and that was in 1942. The next one was in 1988, okay? Well, what's really, really weird and wild is that the previous Aries overtones, the previous times in more recent history when Mars was going to be in an Aries, you know, overtone, you know, the main archetype of the masculine on the world stage, was October 11th, 1941, 26 months following that. September 28th, 1988, 26 months onward from that. And now October 14th, 2020, and the next 26 months after that. If you all know about those years, I mean, you know, obviously that was right at the height of World War II, you know, 41, 42, 43, and then 88, 89. I mean, oh my God, so many powerful world events happened to that point. You know, the dissolution of the Soviet Union, Berlin Wall coming down in 89, all that stuff, all right? Plus the radical Republican takeover of the American government that was happening also. But anyway, we have a new Mars one coming up. Now, the way this works is that this conception point happens when Mars enters the sign of Aries. Right now, Mars is in Aquarius, and the previous overtone for Mars was Aquarius. So we're approaching the end of the development of the Mars archetype moving, taking 26 months to go through all its phases in Aquarius. June 27th enters Aries, but it isn't until October 14th that we have really the birth of it. Now, I want to point out some very interesting things. If you look at this slide, August 17th, 2020, conjunct Eris. There's a square to Saturn. There's the station retrograde at 28 Aries. There's another square to Saturn. Then there's a conjunction with Eris on October 3rd, right? Almost exactly the same time when Mars is at its brightest, opposition, ready to birth into Aries. Back in the end of 2017, when we had our Preparing for 2020 Summit, one of the persons that I very much wanted to invite, and who knows, maybe he's on the call today, I invited him to be on it because he can maybe be involved with the Q&A, is Henry Seltzer, who's a specialist in Eris. And he gave a presentation regarding how Eris is going to be a major player in 2020. And now can you see why? Because it turns out that Eris in this year of 2020 is hanging out the whole year at 23 to 24 Aries. So we have the conjunction on August 17th, 24, 29, and then again at 24, 26. Today, as we speak, it's at 23, about 2340 right now. So this 23rd and 24th degree, does that sound familiar to anyone? I mean, it's just right in the exact same circuitry. So now, please remember, I know that I'm throwing Eris in together with Mars, and I think that we're going to see they have a very, very strong relationship here. And together with Saturn and with Pluto and, you know, all the other main players. Eris has a 560-year orbit. And actually, sometimes it's very slow, you know. So, for example, everybody born in from 1900 onward, it was in Aries. I mean, it's in Aries for here we have the data on it, right? It can be inside the orbit of Pluto, but sometimes. But look, here's the data on it. And here we have the previous Mars overtone Aries, October 11th, 41, 88, 2020. This is the data. You have a slide on it here. The fact that the Aries overtone seems to correspond with the Uranus-Saturn dance was just really blowing my mind, because when we are in the Saturn-Uranus alignment, as we shared yesterday, Eris is still at this 23rd, 24th degree. It'll also be really close to the US Pluto during the Pluto return. Eris is part of it. So what in the world does Eris have to do with all of this? You know, we have to be very careful when we look at the stories of Eris, because they're the patriarchal stories, you know, which may not be the whole story. I mean, well, the way we've dealt with her in our circles is we always make sure we invite her into our circles. We very much empower and honor the energies of Eris that are in my view, it's kind of like a combination of Scorpio and Aries. I mean, it's a very strong version of the feminine. It's definitely wild and independent. She's been called by patriarchies a troublemaker, but I believe she needs to be invited in. And it's kind of like, I'm seeing her, Kaylin, now. You know, when we've talked about this before, is that we're praying that maybe the goddess herself, the great mother herself, is going to make a contribution to the planetary predicament at this particular point, you know, that maybe this Eris placement is an example of what she may do. You know, what she may do in order to assist us in moving into the golden sun energy and to be able to end the system that is being deconstructed at this point. But it's her relationship with Aries that's interesting, because if you look at her previous relationships with the Saturn-Uranus and the Mars overtone that happened before, it was not peaceful, as it were. I have a kind of esoteric view of World War II, which is that if things hadn't turned out a certain way, if there wasn't some kind of divine dispensation that came through, that we might be in a very different world now. In other words, it actually turned out okay. But we're at another turning point, a crisis point in America's history, in the world's history. Those cycles before were not happening as directly, exactly in a critical turning of the ages point. So be aware of Eris energy. Strong women and also men that are willing to really change and look at the shadow. I mean, Eris actually brings up the shadow too, I believe. There's going to be a very strong energy coming from how Eris connects with this. Let's go back to the Mars cycle slide. So this is all happening now. As once Mars goes into Aries, a new type of Aries is being conceived and gestated in the womb. We've done this whole thing where we look at the 26-month Mars cycle as an analog to a lifespan. So June 27th to October 14th corresponds to conception and being in the womb. And then for a good year after October 14th, it's like adolescence and young adulthood and the strength of adulthood leading up to the midlife crisis. So it's all this development, once again, of the Aries archetype in both men and women. And that, of course, for women, like what, warrior Amazon, you know, but Joan of Arc, so on. For men, it's like the way patriarchy has perceived the warrior. Now,
Daniel, can I just insert something really quick before you move on?
Yes.
Something that I find interesting in this, I'm thinking about this because you said the word womb. October 14th, when Mars rises at 21 Aries, it's very close to a star Beta Catos, which is the belly of the whale in the womb. So it's, you know, like maybe emerging out of the womb of that particular, the whale.
And that is, of course, the water area of the sky, and you know, that whole area of the sky, which has been associated with the water bear, not to be confused with the sign of Aquarius, right? So we have all that. We have the fish, and we have the whale, the belly of the whale, and we have the water bear and the streams of water. Yes. So there's what kind of Aries is going to be born? You know, this is part of the project that I am involved with when I work with men and also with women. You know, since most of the people in shamanic astrology are women, is like how to deal with this Aries patriarchal archetype. You know, is it going to be you know, one level of it is the great battle between the light and the dark. You know, been waiting 26,000 years for this. You know, bring it on. You know, which can actually collapse back into, I think, more patriarchal images of battle and warfare. And our Mars classes go into this in some depth. So there's a certain different thing I think that needs to emerge, which is, how does Aries actually become truly vulnerable? I mean, often when I'm referring to both men and women with a lot of Aries, you know, vulnerability is more like, what do I need to work on so as to be stronger, you know, as opposed to recognizing vulnerability as being a tremendous strength, right? I mean, that's. So how do we revision black and white warfare, as it were, even though there is admittedly a battle taking place on the planet, and the languaging I've come into recently is like between the gold sun energy and the black sun energy, right? I mean, that's one way you can talk about it. You know, whether it's the cabal and technocracy versus humanistic matriarchy. Anyway, we talked about that yesterday, but we're adding in this absolutely remarkable thing about the Mars cycle and how it corresponded with the Uranus-Saturn dance that we talked about yesterday. Going back to, can you go to phase 1 if you have that one? Yeah, well, actually, this is only taking it, I guess, till the end of 2020. The phase 1 starts with the birth of the Aries archetype, October 14th, with Mars as brightest. And then it goes direct, then it reaches the original opposition degree, 21 Aries. Look how close that opposition degree is to where Eris is. Again, like the Aries, you know, like pretty amazing. But then this goes on for most of 2021. That Mars is then in the evening sky, and you see it go across the evening sky, going through the challenges of youth, of early adulthood, of you know, the testing itself, in facing the challenges of life. So we cannot leave out the importance of what these Venus cycles and Mars cycles are about, because why? Your chart may or may not be specifically connected to these degrees, but the knowledge of the synodic cycles, these bigger stories of Venus and Mars, which the ancients knew quite well, I mean, well before Hellenistic astrology or well before personal horoscopes, ceremony was done around this. And what it does is it places our personal stories into a bigger story. And that's one of the projects that all of us have today. You know, it's one thing to know your personal story, but then to be able to place it into a bigger story, what Rajar called the planetarization of consciousness. There may be some questions that will come up regarding the Mars cycle, but I think that's as much as I wanted to bring in at this point, and I wanted to show you how Eris corresponds here to the cycles of 2020 and well into 2021.
And there may be, though, definitely will be more going forward. So stay tuned. Right? Okay, so now I think we're ready to talk about the eclipses.
See, there's so many things that make the June eclipses, June, July eclipses, and the ones happening up toward the December solstice, the November, December ones, so important, but particularly the ones in June, because they correspond to one of the shifts happening in 2020, which is the movement of the nodal axis, which had been in Cancer Capricorn, into Gemini Sagittarius. And what this means is that for a good 2-3 months, and surrounding the time period of the June solstice and the solar eclipse, the annular solar eclipse, June 20th, is that the nodes are they're not moving very fast. They're like, this always happens when there's an eclipse season, that the nodes kind of stay at the same degree for 2 to 3 months. Where is this occurring? It's happening at the galactic center and the galactic edge. We do intend to have a whole teleclass coming up, going more deeply into the shift of the nodal axis into Gemini Sag. But the highlight of it is that this eclipse season, I mean, it's so precise. Look at that date, June 20th, 0 Cancer 21. 0 Cancer is the galactic edge. It's opposite of the galactic center. It's where the galactic alignment takes place. Also, that particular eclipse starts in the Middle East. It has a path that traverses through Pakistan, northern India, straight across Tibet, slightly north of Lhasa, directly over Wuhan, and then it ends just as it's about to leave China mainland and go to Taiwan. This is actually sharing with me that eclipses presage things. They don't just give it a sense of what will happen after the eclipse path happens. Now, you can see here then there's 2 lunar eclipses, but those are penumbral lunar eclipses. So unless you happen to be, well, I mean, if there's still no aircraft, if there's still no, if the pollution has been shut down for a few more months, you actually may be able to see the very dim shading of the moon that happens under a penumbral lunar eclipse. That might be one of the advantages. Usually you can't see any difference. It's just a super full moon. But 15 Sag, 13 Capricorn, and then the bullseye one with the annular solar eclipse at 021 Cancer. And then look at the ones following. The total solar eclipse, the one closest to the December solstice, look how close that is to galactic center. And look where that's going over. Eastern Europe, Asia, Australia, Pacific Ocean, totality in Saudi Arabia, India, Sri Lanka. I mean, very, very intriguing. Okay, so.
For those who don't know, galactic center is 27 degrees Sag. So this is at 23, it's just 4 degrees away from what's been identified as galactic center.
You want to show the high man chart?
Yeah. So basically, I was wanting to give, and we have another slide we showed in the first class that we did that we'll see next. But this is one of the ways that the high man is depicted, and this is with the sun on the hand of Orion, or the high man. And this is the star, the constellation with the sun on the hand. And this is something that can only happen for a period of 72 years, maybe 144 years, depending on how you want to track that, where at a solstice, and this happens to be the June solstice, where the sun literally shows up here when it's at 0 Cancer on the day of the exact June solstice. What's happening this year is, so the sun is there, and that's where the sun is every June solstice since 1962 to 2034. However, this particular June solstice features the annular solar eclipse, meaning that there's an eclipse that creates a ring of fire around the sun that that will be visible in the places that Daniel just mentioned. So not
Actually, myself and a couple of close friends, we actually made a booking in Oman to actually experience it, just like we were in Singapore in December to see that one. Unfortunately, due to the current world situation, those hotels are shut down until September. Oman is not accepting any visas from Americans. So basically that is all, no ability to go to be there for that. So it'll be a virtual experience with that, but oh my God, I love annular eclipses. The one in Singapore was just so interesting indeed. I wanted to just mention regarding this galactic edge and galactic center stuff, different parts of the world globally and historically have emphasized one more than the other sometimes. Like the Mayans seem to be much more putting attention on the galactic center, while Egypt and in Northern Europe, much of the attention was on the galactic edge. The stars, the Orion stars, the Pleiades, Sirius, the stars that are in what what the Lakota call the sacred hoop. In fact, I learned when I was in Ireland that their whole doctrine of world ages was based when the sun would be on the hand of the quote unquote high man during the Beltane, the spring equinox, the fall equinox, and now certainly the June solstice. That was their big one. That was the one that turned the whole thing around over. So this has really been strong in my attention for a long time. And then we see this June solstice right on the hand of the. Now, please don't worry so much about the imagery. The high man. I mean, you can. I mean, it is true that but at least in Europe and in Egypt, that the imagery is virtually always a masculine symbol, archetypally masculine. Certainly if you put a woman up there, it's going to still be kind of an energy of archetypally masculine. The Irish did a really weird thing, in pagan times, it was Cuchulainn. Cuchulainn was projected, their great warrior hero, as it were. But then when the Christians came, what they did is they projected St. Patrick. So the high man was St. Patrick holding the sun on his hand, So it's fascinating because you can project anything you want onto it. But the key factor is that in the imagery that most of the Western world uses, this is perceived of as a hand reaching up, and right at the top of the hand is this exact point, which is the galactic alignment point. So this is, I think, incredibly significant that eclipse in 2020 would be happening right at that point. It's really rare to have an eclipse this close to an exact solstice or equinox point.
In fact, the one that happened in 2001 that was a total solar eclipse on the June solstice. And this is data that comes from Gemini Brett, by the way. And then it was in 9/11, 2001, so a few months later when the Twin Towers fell. And so now we have one happening again on June 20th. And what's interesting about this imagery is this is the sun with the moon moving in front of it. It's not quite big enough to completely cover the sun as in a total eclipse, total solar eclipse, but it leaves a ring of fire around the outer edge that we see from Earth as this ring of fire eclipse, which is why annular eclipses are kind of interesting and unusual, because they're like a total solar eclipse, but not quite totally able to. The moon is so far away; it's not quite big enough to completely cover the sun.
But it still will set up the exact same phenomena of a total solar eclipse, of having a very narrow track, about 200 kilometers wide, specifically paintbrushing a certain area of the Earth. Yeah, and we do want to, you can go to that other thing that, oh, yeah, let's look at this. This is
Yeah.
another great
This
view of,
is the eclipse sun, the annular eclipse sun on the hand of the high man, or Orion on the hand of Orion. And Gemini Brett was saying that this is the last total solar eclipse on the hand of the high man, and this sorrow cycle for 26,000 years, or almost 26,000 years. So.
and then the next slide, he shows that the thing he discovered, which was a remarkable way in which the eclipse seasons and cycles can correspond. You know the next one. You have the next one up there. Or
Well,
did you take
so
that?
I think I don't know. I think
You know,
that
his research on on Pluto and
uh,
what,
that one. Let me see if I can find it. Where the 37.
yeah, that one.
I don't think it's in this one. This was in
Okay,
that was in
all right.
the last
Just
one.
that he found some very interesting synchronicities between between Pluto cycles and these eclipse seasons, and it sort of, you know,
Yeah.
brilliant stuff. I really want to give him credit for this. But then again, I guess we found another piece, you know, about how the correspondence of the synodic cycle of Mars corresponds with the Uranus, the Uranus Saturn cycle, which is just
Right.
mind
Yeah, so
blowing.
yeah, he talked a little bit here about the Saturn Pluto
Mhm.
cycles, and I think in our first class we talked more about that too. So
Right,
yeah.
we did. Okay,
So
let's look more deeply at this June solstice chart. Now you can see here that Jupiter and Pluto are still really close to each other. You can see how the south node is you know, right in that zone, whether you have to do with, whether it has to do with the 27.5 degrees Sag, or whether you're using the exact galactic alignment point, which is 0 Capricorn. And there's the sun in the north node at the galactic edge. You'll also notice on this the placement of, did you put?
well, Eris, I wasn't able to get Eris in here. Is that what you're talking about? But Eris is at 2428 Aries, and you see here's Pluto at 2418 Capricorn, so they're in an exact square at that particular time, and Jupiter really close to that as well at that solstice.
There's Pluto and Eris forming a dynamic relationship and amplified by Jupiter.
Right. And you can see here also Mars at 25 Pisces, meaning within, you know, by June 27th, it'll be moving into Aries to begin its 0 phase right after that solstice.
You know, one of the things that you know, it's really kind of interesting when, you know, Brad too, when he was presenting this information, he said, "Okay, I guess I'm going to have to show a little bit my Scorpio side now." You know, his sun sign Scorpio, right? And he was referring, of course, to the 2001 time frame, about how that was the beginning of the taking away of individual liberties, and, you know, an eternal war of terror and so on. So if you call it out, and that's part of what you need to do in a Plutonian time frame, in a time period where, you know, whole world structure is being deconstructed, well then, if you looked at it as calling out the shadow, if you use the same kind of imagery, well then the powers that shouldn't be could very easily think of that time of the June solstice, of the time of, you know, you can't travel unless you have your Bill Gates tattoo saying you've been vaccinated, you know, or that you know, all those scenarios that do need to be called out, or the time period where one realizes that every church, every stadium, every movie theater, every school has 5G in it. I mean, it could easily be, and then you have the next level of the taking away of our autonomy and individual rights. You know, at that point, just calling it out. I'm certainly not predicting that. In fact, I think the energies of the that are coming through to awaken as many of us as possible to who we really are, is going to be a counterbalance to that. And the
Yeah.
Earth herself, Eris, I'm saying, please, Eris, do something major, you know.
Right, right. And then what's interesting is that the December solstice um, is also showing with Eris at 23 Aries, conjunct Mars, square Pluto again, right?
Yes.
And yeah.
And so again, you can see that not only is Eris involved with the Jupiter-Plutonian drama, but then when Mars enters into Aries, and particularly around the time period when Mars is around the degree of opposition, which is the new overtone for Mars, how Eris is involved with Mars. I mean, it's quite a setup. And then there's time periods where Saturn is involved too. You know, so Saturn, Jupiter, and Pluto do have a whole series of relationships with Eris.
And it also just so happens to be the day of the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction as well. So, so the two solstices this year are filled with amazing energy for various reasons that we just talked about. Yeah.
Kadia is putting on the chat box that because she loves, as a lot of you all do, using the Rajarian Sabian symbols, and the Sabian symbols for those degrees she's saying are quite profound, and they can often be quite profound to understand what's happening in the world process.
Yeah.
So these are you have these now as handouts and as slides. You know, you all get this from those of you who are taking the class. So you have these to study, you know, and get your own clues regarding it. And I haven't even mentioned. You can see how Chiron itself can have a part to play in this. We've not really mentioned it, but look at the Chiron degree for the U.S. Natal chart. 20
degrees.
And Chiron will be pretty much right up to that at the Plutonian return, you know. And I want to give a shout out to Dale O'Brien, who has written recently some really remarkable articles regarding what happened historically when Chiron was in Aries. It was exactly at 3 Aries at the time of the debacle of the end of the Democratic Party in 1968. It was also associated with a lot of assassinations. Chiron has entered into Aries. Now, if you look at this, symbolically, we talked a lot yesterday about the relationship of Saturn and Uranus. Well, Chiron is like the bridge between those two, you know, so that we could say theoretically that Chiron is a teacher in order how to bridge the transcendent with the egoic realm, you know, between Saturn and Uranus. That's one of the ways it's been interpreted. But as a teacher, what is Aries? What is Chiron and Aries teaching? Well, I think it's simply contributing to our what we've been exploring up to this point, which is that it's the revision of Aries. You know, it can't just be about professional armies and war and, you know, domination and even if they believe it's on the level of nobility and you know. There's the good guys and the bad guys, you know, and that sort of thing. So I think it's tricky. I mean, historically, Chiron and Aries has not been a quote peaceful time, right? But let's hope that at this time period that it's a teacher about how to have a different relationship with Aries.
It's interesting to consider too that as the U.S. is going into its Pluto return, you know, that it's kind of already, it's going to be an extra long one because it's already started due to the fact that Jupiter and Pluto are opposite Mercury now, and then it'll catch up to Pluto. But in the next couple of years, I don't know how long it's going to take for Chiron to get to 20 Aries, but it's going to go through a Chiron return.
Right. Right.
So that so we could be in some interesting underworld energies for a while in this country. Just saying.
Well, I mean, if the whole purpose, I mean, again, I want to say that a global event of this scale, you have to go back to the events of the Lower Dryas 12,800 years ago to have something that is so completely global. And it is a whole that's designed to deconstruct the previous system. And I want to just, you can get a different view about this from the Aboriginal prophecies. I mean, they're relating back 85,000 years, and they're finally talking about what they see happening. And it's the deconstructing of a system. What a blessing for a lot of us that we have a time to stop, to pause, to reflect, to see what's really important, and to get off the rat race, and so on. Those of us that have the fortune of being able to do that, we should be filled with gratitude as a new set of possibilities for humanity streams through. It is the turning of the ages.
Yes, it is. And just so you notice, because Pluto and Jupiter are at 24 degrees today and tomorrow, exactly opposite Mercury. So this information, we're bringing this information to you through the lens of Jupiter and Pluto,
Right.
right? And to Mercury, the messenger, right?
And actually, the alignment right now of Saturn and Mars, if you see that in the morning sky, is actually at this time in history in alignment with Altair, which is the eye of the eagle, and it's one of the reasons why in our times now, I look at the sign of Aquarius as having a strong relationship with eagle, big vision, objective overview, or that still point, that place within ourselves that has calmness and has center in the midst of whatever gets thrown out there at the world, at us, in our own families, or in the country we happen to be in the town we happen to be in, and so on. It's that still point, that ability to connect to that transcendent eagle that connects us to pure consciousness and to that place of who we really are, which I think is not the shadow of Aquarius, but the spiritual vision of Aquarius.
Beautiful. So the eclipse coming up on the 4th of July, the birthday of the US, is at 13 degrees. So the sun and the moon, sun at 13 Cancer, moon at 13 Capricorn. And this is really relating us back to this very powerful grand cross that happened in 2014, where we had all the planets at 13 degrees. And it had been, you know, like I want to say like a couple thousand years since they'd had such a close grand cross, with all the planets being in the exact same degree, just different minutes. And you can see that here. Mars was at 13 Libra, Pluto at 13 Capricorn, Uranus at 13 Aries, and Jupiter was at 13 Cancer. And of course, the US sun is at 13 Cancer. So that's pretty powerful activation that happened then. And then an eclipse comes along on the 4th of July this year, where the sun is at 13 Cancer and the moon is at 13 Capricorn, activating, you know, having that full moon. And then of course we still have Pluto and Jupiter opposite Mercury. So that eclipse, even though it's a penumbral eclipse, just barely darkening the edge of the moon, is a powerful activation for the US chart. And perhaps we're also seeing a presaging, as you were saying, Daniel, of events that are happening now that are taking us towards both the eclipses that are taking place.
And then we don't have it on this chart here, but keeping in mind that Eris at that point is going to be about 23, the late degrees of 23 Aries.
Yes, yeah.
So you have all these charts to reference as we go through these next months to get your own insights, to get your own downloads regarding, I mean, even the Aboriginals that I was listening to, they said, we knew that something was coming. We thought that the event would happen, but we thought it was going to be some kind of a wave, you know. This is blowing our minds that it turns out to be this, you know, but still here it is, right? And so you cannot know for sure. I mean, prophecy is riddled with challenges. If any of you listen to people that what's his name? The guy that says he's the reincarnation of Edgar Casey, you know, he's been saying the same thing since 2012, and it's like, oh, they changed the timeline. Okay, they changed the timeline. Sorry, it's not happening.
You'd think he'd stop predicting.
Like putting a prediction out there changes the timeline. So I surrender. I mean, it's up to her. You know, it's up to forces larger than our own little minds to see what's taking place here. But just remember, probably, if there's the last thing for me to say here before we open it up, just remember the three worlds approach. You know, don't be in denial about what you see in the middle world. Trust that everything is fine. It's all according to plan. And then the underworld is saying that there's no way. It's surrender. It's big surrender. We don't know what'll happen. Could be the asteroid. You never know. That might still come.
So this is the November 30th full moon eclipse. Just a quick look at that. And interesting, the moon is not far from where Venus will be when she rises in June. So it feels like there's an activation, and these are connected to the stars of Aldebaran and Antares. So this eclipse is aligning with those royal stars and also where Venus began her new cycle. So just something to be aware of. We don't really need to go into a lot of detail about that unless there's something more you want to say, Daniel.
Nope. I don't have anything. That's
okay.
just another little punctuation point.
And then the December 14th solar eclipse, new moon eclipse, is not far from galactic center, 23 Sag. Mercury's close by, and
right.
And of course we still have Pluto at around the 24-degree mark in square to Eris, and Mars at 20, almost 21 Aries. So again, there's just these amazing events that are happening around these eclipses worth paying attention to. So
I thought of just one other thing that wasn't on the chart. Since we did bring Chiron into it, there will be a point in early July, like around July, it could be also one of these punctuation points, about July, the first week of July. Actually, you can see it on the July 4th chart you had, which is Mars in Aries conjunct Chiron.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
It's close. I mean, it's a few days after that, it's more exact, but that's the one time in the current Mars overtone cycle where it's back in the earlier degrees of Aries. So it'll be in that first 10 days or so of July that Mars and Chiron in Aries are together, and we could see like some clues coming through at that point about what kind of teaching Chiron is trying to give to Aries.
Right, and that really, like, probably in about 10 days, it's exact from this particular time. So yeah. Okay, so
that was my final thought on that. Yeah.
That's a good noticing. So if anybody wants to have questions, insights, ahas, well, screams of outrage, you can raise your hand or you can unmute yourself. Probably raise your hand, because then I can try to take people in order. If you don't know how to raise your hand, then just unmute yourself and jump in and we'll figure it out.
What a difference from yesterday. Yesterday it's like we had about 30 people chatting and we had everybody wanting to get on. What happened?
Right? Okay, good. Yeah, Sheridan, go. Oh,
Oh,
uh,
sorry.
oh, sorry. Go ahead, Annalise, and then we'll do Sheridan, since you're already on.
Okay. Gosh, I'm kind of nervous to say this. This actually kind of pertains to yesterday's workshop. And I basically was thinking about the Ayn Rand Atlas Shrugged book and the discussion on that. And I remember the first time that I read that book when I was in college, and my roommate was reading it and was like raving about it. And so I just decided to read it, and it really affected me like so profoundly. And I remember it being like just something that kind of changed my life and the way I thought about the world. And then as I continued my education and went to law school and like started to learn about what a bad rap Ayn Rand has, because I never really like looked into it beyond just reading the book. Then I started to learn about all the negative political implications and kind of the bigger picture around that, which we were discussing yesterday. And I remember kind of retreating a little bit and being like really surprised, because my initial impression when reading that book, I really felt it in my heart. It was kind of like, how do I say this? Like, you know, if you're in a romantic relationship or something and you want that other person to show up so badly and they just can't. That's kind of how I interpreted the message in the book, as being like kind of the pain that you feel when others don't take the incredible privilege of the human experience seriously, or they don't value it enough to like kind of step up and say, look at this incredible, beautiful experience that we have, and how far can we take this, and like, let's not take it for granted. That's like the heart message that I kind of got from that book. So I just remember like learning the public opinion about it, and then being like, oh shoot, I didn't even think of it that way. And and I never really like looked into Ayn Rand's life and maybe that is just like a very idealistic way to think of things, and I can see how it can kind of go down. There's, you know, like a dark path that can kind of go down, which we are obviously seeing, that kind of philosophy. I hope I'm making sense.
Oh, sure, sure. I mean, it's basically the heartbreak experience. I'll give you one example. In the early 70s, I was a true believer in the organization called Transcendental Meditation. I was in a circle with Maharishi Mahesh Yogi. We were going to change the world. And I totally bought into everything he was saying. And there's something he was saying that stuck in my heart big time, which was, we don't care about the way the world is. We only care about the way the world should be, right? But then it broke my heart when I realized that he only wanted the sons and daughters of the rich to be in his circle, and that he had actually a ridiculously bad attitude toward anybody else on the planet, and he was just simply an upper class elitist trying to make as much money as he could. It was incredibly heartbreaking. And when I've looked at Ayn Rand, I mean, I'm aware of the people that had the similar kind of experience you did with it. And then I look at the people that still use her as the source of their religious views. And in all honesty, the people that still use her as their foundation piece, and we listed a lot of them, you know, in the thing yesterday, it's the exact same view that one of the other cults, I mean, it's kind of like there's two cults that run the American government. One is the Silicon Valley cult, and the other is this, both Republicans and Democrats are part of it. They're like neo-Calvinists. They basically believe that if you're rich, you've already been blessed by God. If you're poor, you've already been damned by God. And so anybody who's poor, anybody who's not rich and part of the 1%, is already lost. And so therefore, there's no need to have any compassion for anybody else. That's their view. And that comes directly from the way they were impacted by the the Republican right wing. That's what their view of it. But then it's no different between them and the Democratic Party upper echelon. There's no, what I was saying yesterday about the lack of compassion and empathy, which is the feature that I most was heartbroken about, because I realized this guy that I thought was wonderful, enlightened, and was going to save the world had no empathy or heart.
Yeah, totally get it.
Thank you for sharing the vulnerability around that.
Oh, of course. Thank you.
You know, it's interesting that I think that there's a lot of people like that who have inspired others, right? So I'm just going to use the example of Marion Zimmer Bradley, who she wrote The Myths of Avalon, and that book changed my life. And then later it comes out after she dies that she, you know, she was into some weird things, and her daughter was part of a sex cult. She brought her daughter into this thing. Whatever. There's all this stuff out there, and it's like,
and even worse about her husband.
Right. So it's like, well, does that mean that her work is, you know, something I shouldn't like be excited about because of the way it inspired me? I don't know. So anyway, it's a really good question, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And for us to be aware and to go, okay, so because I went and reread the book again, and I was like, man, she was really tapped into something when she brought that book through. And she also had a dark side that we only just learned about in more recent years. So, yeah. So thank you for sharing.
That's but Kaylin, of course, that is a hugely important philosophical question, because I mean, I could do a whole workshop on what I have discovered in my personal life with the shadow side of Peruvian shamans, Native American teachers, and Indian gurus. I mean, I could, if I put my whole attention on that, it would take up hours and hours. And, you know, like, so how do you separate maybe, well, Osho, for example, filled with shadow. Some of his books are some of the best books ever written, you know? I mean, how do you separate the teaching from the teacher? Well, maybe, just maybe, and this is kind of where I'm at now, I really do care about whether a person walks their talk and is willing to take responsibility for the way that they've, you know, inflicted pain on other people because they haven't dealt with their own shadow. You can still take the teaching, but I'm not necessarily forgiving the person who, I mean, I can forgive them to a certain extent. I mean, on one level of forgiveness, but I also would love them to make amends.
If they're still around. Right? Yeah. Somebody just said Bikram, and I've heard a lot of things about that too, so.
Yeah, Bikram, exactly. Yep, that's all coming out right now, and I've assisted a few people that are fully involved in that. So they should be aware of the shadow of it.
So
and then Yogi Bhajan. I mean, we could go on and on about that, but it's really about compassion and being in our hearts and knowing who we really are. You know, question everything and get in touch with who you really are, and that all is well.
So I have Sheridan and then Xana hands raised, so we'll take them next. And then if anybody else wants to raise their hand, or after that, we'll just see who else. So Sheridan, take it away.
Maybe what you guys were just talking about is that it's kind of like you look at the book, the people through the three worlds as well, right? I'm like obsessed with the three worlds right now, which is what I wanted to comment on today. You know, I went up into the mountains. We're allowed to leave to like go be in the mountains or go to the store or medical stuff, right? Those are the things. I live in Colorado, so luckily they're still letting us go into the mountains. And I was thinking of you, Daniel, and I was like, wow, you can't like get out of your subdivision right now. And I was just like, wow, you know, my heart goes out to you while I'm like in the mountains. But the awareness that I had, and it was interesting, was, you know, like the middle world, right? The real world and what's going on. And like, there's all this heavy stuff and everything, but like nature and the earth to me is like part of the middle world as well, right? The physicality piece of it, right? Like the earth sign piece of it, you know, and how it's like, that's still what's happening in the real world as well, right? The mountains, the ocean, the rivers, the stones, the trees, you know, and it was like, okay, not everything in the middle world is just all like dark and gloom, you know, and it's not about like just getting into the celestial piece of it and being like, oh, well, you know, it's all good or whatever, but that it's like that part of like touching a tree is still part of like what's actually happening in the real world right now, you know, and that felt very like opening, like expansive to me, you know. So I just wanted to share that. And then on my way driving back home from that experience, this like huge golden eagle like
Yes.
swooped down in front of my car, like so close. I mean, it like startled me, and then like swept up this thermal and like came back around right in front of my car. And it's not like you see a golden eagle every day, you know. It was like, it was pretty magnificent. So when you were talking about the whole Aquarian and the eagle,
My wife, when she was in India, she was up in McLeod-Ganj at the same time I was trying to get out of the U.S. to come back here. And the best thing that happened to her there was that she was having every day, almost every hour, relationship with golden eagles and that were coming to her window up there in northern India. And that was extremely beautiful. But of course, you have a chance to do that. I'm thinking of the millions of people right here in this city that can't go out onto the street, you know, I mean, and they don't have nature at all. But I am quite aware, and this is why I was emphasizing the Taurus part yesterday, that we got to have an equal amount of Taurus. I mean, even if it was just all idealistic Aquarius and not the shadow of Aquarius, you still need Taurus and Scorpio, because like basically all four of those signs are involved in the in the turning of the ages. You know, so that's why we're shamanic astrologers. You know, I mean, the people I follow that are into the words, use the word ascension. It's the same as Aurobindo's view that it's the earth. The earth is part of it. That it's the connection of our shadow side, the connection of the earth, the density of the earth, the stones and the rocks, all sentient beings. We're all in it together. The Aboriginal teachings are always that. It's about nature. It's about the animals. I mean, in core shamanism, that human beings, and this is, I didn't say this yesterday, but I just have to say this now. My shamanic teachers basically say, to be an authentic human being, we owe more to the animals than we do to other humans. That if all you ever do is hang out with humans and their technology, you cannot be a full authentic human being, because it's wolves, it's eagles, it's trees, you know, I mean, that's what makes us fully human. Without our connection to that, then all we are left with is the shadow of Aquarius.
and how hard for the people you're talking about that can't even like leave their homes right now and have, you know, get any of that physical touch connection to that. Obviously you can always connect with your heart, but still it's like, yeah.
The earth only abides, however, and this is why I'm asking, you know, that my prayer goes to Eris and all the different representatives and energies of the earth. And the Aborigines are saying the earth is expanding right now. That it's going through a mutation. They don't do this whole Aquarian thing that it's splitting off and, you know, that now there's one earth and another earth, but the earth itself is expanding. And it's an expanding earth theory. And that it's throwing off this, this imposed structure that has reached the end of the line.
Detoxing. I had a class I was teaching some of my students today, and we were talking about it, and some of the things you mentioned last night, and they were just talking about like, oh, the earth's detoxing right now. And I was like, oh, I kind of like that, that word with it. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you too. I'm so happy you got to do that, because it is magical and alive out there. We do have one little hill we get to go up on outside of our house, and to be able to see the sky with no planes and the less pollution in Manila that we've ever seen, you know, I mean, so there is that the earth is healing at this point. But we can't forget though that good old Mr. Musk is putting them satellites up, and that's going on too. And fortunately, there's more awareness of that coming forth. Even some other astrologers are talking about it now. Mary has her hands up.
Well, no, Xana's
Oh.
next.
Oh,
If I can get her to unmute her. Can you unmute
I
yourself?
see it.
Oh, good, because it wasn't working from my end.
Oh, okay. Yeah, no, it gave me a little instruction
Okay,
and I
good.
followed it.
All right.
So, Sheridan, I totally hear you and Daniel about getting outside. Here in Massachusetts, we're like west of Boston, and there's all this conservation land in town, and I volunteer, help taking care of it, keeping the trails clear. But I have a big black dog, and we go walking in the conservation land every day, and there's different places we can walk to, and it's pretty wet and muddy, and I can't see Venus with the Pleiades, but it is still really, really great to get outside. No golden eagles, though. What was I going to say? Last night when you were talking a lot about Aquarius, and when Jupiter in my North Node is in the first degree of Aquarius,
yeah.
and Saturn is on it right now, and Mars just went over, and Jupiter and Saturn are going to come up on it in December, and Uranus is going to connect with my midheaven in Taurus later this year. So I just wanted to say I really enjoyed hearing a lot about Aquarius, and because I'm thinking a lot about that, and I'm like, okay, how can I embody the positive side of it and not get too detached?
Oh yeah.
But
I mean, actually, funnily enough, the recent sessions I've had just over the last 3 days, it's all people that have a progressive part of their chart that's Aquarius. All right. And so, I mean, this is not about, if you're aware of the shadow, that's cool, but you don't, that doesn't, it's your intention is to be able to perceive that and experience that ground of consciousness, the eagle view, the ability to have that still point, to have that center. And you have a huge advantage. You can see through this and experience what Aquarius is intended to be about, in my opinion.
That's what I'm going for. So yeah, thank you for sharing everything about that. So,
That's awesome. Thank you. So Mary, did you want to unmute yourself, and then Laura, and then we might be done. Okay.
Yeah. There, I heard there's 2 places where they show that, and I was hitting the wrong one. What I just was real triggered by what Sheridan was saying and Daniel about connecting to the animals, because I remember hearing that your heart isn't fully open unless you've had the experience of loving an animal. And I did not do that till really late in life, because I was bitten by a dog when I started kindergarten. I was horribly afraid of a lot of animals for a big piece of my life. But I would just say then, having that experience in the last 10 years, I just have to agree with that, because it really does penetrate at a level even deeper than you have with your own children in some ways. And I just was really thankful that I got to have that experience. And the truth of that statement was really proven to me through that experience. So I just wanted to offer that.
That's great. What I've noticed in my life and with a lot of my clientele and friends, that frequently it has to start there for some people. You know, it's like they have to fully open-heartedly love their dog or their cat, you know, and that's the opening. And then maybe they can move on to fully heartfully loving another human. You know, the animals are our teachers. I mean, they've always been our teachers first, before we got to the point of developing our technologies.
Yes, and the other piece of it that's so interesting was, I think, being afraid to love that animal for so long and then having the opportunity to do it was real similar to the way I experienced people in my life, because I had a really authoritarian post-traumatic stress dad who kind of came at me in the same way that dog did. So there was a real parallel between.
Wow. Very interesting, Mary.
You just find awareness of something so bright on the other side of it. Yeah, cool. Thank you for this. I'm done. I just want to say that this was last two talks have been so big that I can't take them in and just watching it. I've almost had to draw back a little bit, and then with the intent of listening chunk by chunk to the recording. But thank you for doing it.
Thanks, Mary.
Okay, Laura, can you unmute yourself?
Yes.
Awesome.
Hi. I just wanted to share, I'm really fascinated about this topic of the teacher that then we realize these things later, and I think we're calling it cancel culture for, in the movie industry and the people that we've decided, were abusive, and it's a very interesting topic. And someone wrote in the chat about maybe in this time of the Kali Yuga, where only a quarter of the heart is open.
Yeah, right. That was part of the Kali Yuga teaching. Yes.
Yeah, and this is something that I think was such a mystery to all of us about Trump at first. Of like, wait a minute, why is the Christian right embracing this guy who's, clearly not a family man or moral in any way? And there's a program on Netflix called The Family. I don't know if you guys have seen it. It starts out slow, and I'm like, kind of duh, like I know this, but it really explains, and I think it's really important for Americans to understand this concept that the Christian right has embraced him as God works through the imperfect vessel. We've completely accepted that he is an imperfect vessel, but he's the one who's going to do our work and, get all the judges and blah, blah, blah. Our bigger agenda, he's the one. He's the one. They don't look at his little imperfections. They look at God, this bigger testament of God working through this imperfect vessel. That was a really major awakening for me in terms of understanding why they embrace him, and they're not going to change because he slept with a prostitute. They don't care.
No,
We're going to catch him at something and they're going to see. No, that's not what it's about.
For him, he's dad. He's dad. He's their good dad.
Yeah, and he's an imperfect vessel. So if you know that, there's nothing he can do that's going to change their mind about him. And I think that's important for us to understand. So I just wanted to add that to the conversation.
Yeah, no, it's true.
Good. Thank you, Laura. Okay, I think that's it.
Someone put in here, I just had to comment on this, Alice. Xi is going to, what does it say?
Subsidize.
I can't,
It's going to subsidize construction and cement to make up for the lost growth as soon as the virus wanes down.
I have no trust whatsoever in that guy. I've connected him with his vision of connection to Mao. And for those of you who don't know this, do you know that there was no trace of the virus in either Beijing or Shanghai? Nothing was shut down there whatsoever. And of all the stock markets in the world, the Chinese one has gone down the least. He's a complete technocrat, and of course he's total nationalist Chinese. Of course, so is Mao. But does that mean that that there's genuine, open-hearted compassion for the planet? I doubt it. I'm open, but you have to see the full story on this character. And we know a lot about this character because I'm living in the Philippines and seeing how China is taking over the Philippines right now.
And the whole thing is they have to look good. China has to look good. So if they've had lost growth and he's going to subsidize things so their growth can return, that's so he can look good. There's
to maintain control. Right now, he's under a lot of pressure to maintain his president for life status. I mean, actually, he and Trump have a lot in common, quite frankly.
As do their charts that we saw yesterday. Anyway, so I think we're complete, Daniel. And so I'm just going to unmute all. We'll say goodbye, and it's been really great. Thank you all so much for your support, and it's been quite an amazing ride. So
yeah, absolutely. Thanks, everybody. And we'll talk next sometime in May.
So,
Thank you.
hey, bye.
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 Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye. I love that.
Bye. Bye.